I want you to start by doing a little thought experiment with me today.
Okay, I'm game.
So think about the secondhand items you own. You know, maybe it's a thrifted denim jacket or a vintage armchair you found at a flea market, or even just a used textbook.
Right.
We buy these things for their aesthetic or their utility or, just their price. But what if those objects carried something else entirely?
Like what?
Like, what if they literally held the memories or the trauma or even the actual consciousness of the people who owned them before you?
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's an inherently unsettling idea. As a modern society, we're heavily conditioned to think of objects as purely inert matter,
Right, exactly.
We see them as dead weight. They're completely detached from human emotion the second they change hands.
But today, we are going deep into a worldview where that assumption is totally turned on its head. We have some incredible source material for this deep dive today.
Yeah, we really do.
And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to recount a couple of spooky stories.
No, not at all.
We are going to explore the cultural, the psychological, and the, seemingly supernatural mechanisms of what we usually categorize as possession or, spiritual attachment.
And I think what sets these transcripts apart is just the sheer level of granular, mundane detail.
Oh, absolutely.
These accounts, they totally bypass the cinematic Hollywood versions of possession that we're so used to seeing. They're deeply rooted in everyday life, which just makes the mechanisms behind them incredibly fascinating to analyze.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we are looking at two really visceral, highly detailed accounts of entities attaching themselves to the living. And we have to start with the chilling, decades-long case of a woman named Christy Panday.
Yeah, this case is wild.
To understand how this mechanism works, you have to picture the setting for you, the listener. We are in a middle-class Bengali household. The family runs a small, home-based hosiery factory.
Right, so it's a modest house with a tiled roof sitting right next to this noisy workshop.
Exactly. And the family's business model is actually a crucial element of the environment here.
Yeah, because they don't purchase pristine, neatly manufactured rolls of fabric. They buy what the industry calls Bangladeshi pieces.
Which are just massive.
Yeah, they're massive, heavy bales of scrap cloth that larger manufacturing companies just discard. And they are bought entirely by weight, sight unseen.
So it's a total gamble.
Completely. You open a giant sack, and you just get an unpredictable assortment of fabric scraps that the family then pieces together to make garments.
So one day, Christy, who is a college student at the time, is poking around the factory, and she pulls this white t-shirt out of one of these giant scrap bales.
Right.
Now, in their specific line of work, white cloth simply doesn't sell. It's, it's useless for the family business.
So she just decides to keep it.
Yeah, she thinks she can cut it up to make clothing for the small deity idol they keep in the house.
Yeah.
But she notices something on the back of the shirt. There is a dark spatter.
And this is where it's so interesting to notice how the human brain instantly attempts to rationalize anomalies to maintain a sense of safety.
She does exactly that. She just assumes it's a tobacco or beetle leaf stain.
Right, because the workers who handle these massive bales often chew beetle leaf, and it leaves a dark reddish-brown residue.
Yeah, so she figures someone just spit and it dried on the fabric. She doesn't think for a single second that it might be blood.
Of course not, why would you?
Exactly. So she takes the shirt, folds it neatly, and puts it in her bedroom closet. And this physical proximity is where the psychological intrusion begins.
And the intrusion doesn't start with slammed doors or objects flying across the room like in the movies.
No, it's much quieter.
It begins with a very subtle, almost imperceptible boundary test in her subconscious.
Christy starts having these recurring dreams. In these dreams, a young boy appears, and he is desperately trying to communicate with her.
Like mouthing words, right?
Yes, he's mouthing words with intense urgency, but there's no audio. Christy can see his lips moving, but the connection just keeps dropping. She wakes up, or the dream simply fades to black before she can decipher what he is saying.
If we look at this through a biological lens, it's very similar to the cordyceps fungus.
Oh, the zombie ant thing.
Exactly, the parasitic organism that infects insects. The parasite doesn't just violently take over the host in one day, it tests the biological defenses, looking for a vulnerability.
Just quietly spreading its spores through the nervous system.
Right, while the host goes about his normal day, completely unaware.
That is a terrifyingly accurate way to picture it. The parasite is trying to establish a neural link, but something is blocking the signal. Until one day, the host's defenses drop completely by accident.
And it's such a mundane accident, too.
It really is. Christy wears a simple Jesus cross necklace. She treats it mostly as a fashion accessory rather than a deeply religious artifact, but she wears it constantly. But one day, while she is bathing, the chain snaps. The cross slips down the drain and is just lost forever.
And that very night, the audio in her dream suddenly turns on.
Yes. The dream returns, but this time, the static clears. She can hear the boy perfectly, and the entity explicitly reveals the mechanics of the situation.
What does he say?
He tells her, literally, I couldn't connect with you because of that cross. I am out of my body. I've left my physical form. Let's be friends.
Wow. I mean, this raises such an important question about the rules governing this specific supernatural ecosystem. The entity is not all-powerful.
Right, it has limits.
It is bound by rigid laws of physics and faith. It required a physical anchor, which was the blood-stained shirt, to establish proximity to her.
And it was actively repelled by an object of faith.
Exactly. Regardless of whether Christie's belief was profound or purely aesthetic, once that protective barrier washes down the drain, the psychological override initiates.
And the override is staggering. We start seeing these bizarre behavioral shifts that completely defy logic and her lifelong conditioning.
Like the food, for example.
Yes, take the food. In a typical Bengali household, communal eating is standard. The mother serves the food, rice, dal, vegetables, fish, all placed together on one large plate. It is a deeply ingrained cultural norm.
Right.
Suddenly, Christy refuses this. She demands that her food be served in completely separate, individual bowls.
You know, to a Western listener, asking for separate bowls sounds trivial. Maybe just a quirky texture preference.
Yeah, like you don't want your peas touching your mashed potatoes.
Exactly. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of Bengali collectivist culture, it is a massive red flag. It is a stark assertion of individualism in a household that operates communally.
It's a total rejection of the norm.
Right. It is the first external signal that her internal software is being overwritten by a foreign consciousness that doesn't adhere to the family's rules.
The behavioral shifts are strange, but the physical shifts are what really shake you. The muscle memory completely changes.
This part is wild.
So, Christy's mother hears a rhythmic jingling sound outside in the dark courtyard late at night. She goes out to investigate, and there is Christy, barefoot in the dark, balancing a football on her feet.
Doing keepy-uppies.
Yes. She is doing professional level keepy-uppies, juggling the ball effortlessly. And keep in mind, Christy is a young woman who has never played a sport in her life. She has absolutely zero athletic background.
And this is the detail that forces us to look past simple psychological distress.
How so?
Well, it is one thing for a person experiencing a mental health crisis to act wildly out of character. It is entirely another to suddenly possess fine motor skills, balance, and physical coordination that they have never developed.
Because that takes actual training.
Exactly. Motor cortex programming requires years of repetitive physical training to build those neural pathways. You cannot simply hallucinate your way into executing complex football tricks in the pitch dark.
So when her mother, totally bewildered, asks her what she's doing, Christy slowly turns to her, but the voice that projects from Christy's mouth is not her own. It is a heavy, deep, resonant male voice. And it simply says, "Can't you see I'm playing?"
What's fascinating here is how the entity begins to aggressively assert patriarchal dominance.
Oh, for sure.
It isn't just taking over her vocal cords, it is systematically forcing a young, traditionally obedient woman to shatter every cultural and gender taboo of her household.
And that dominance is on full display during the smoking incident. Christy's mother walks into her daughter's bedroom and finds the air completely thick with choking smoke.
In her own bedroom.
Yeah. Christy is sitting in the middle of her bed, spread eagle, sitting exactly like a man taking up space, just smoking a cigarette.
And her mother scolds her, right, assuming she just picked up a rebellious habit of company.
Yes, but Christy doesn't cower or apologize. She aggressively flicks the burning cigarette butt directly at her mother, nearly setting her cotton sari on fire.
It is an act of profound disrespect designed to shock and terrify the parents. The entity is drawing a line in the sand, demonstrating that the daughter they raised is no longer in the driver's seat of her own physical vessel.
The parents are terrified, obviously, so they turn to traditional protection. The mother goes to a local temple and acquires a taga.
Which is a blessed red thread, right?
Exactly, meant to act as a protective charm. She ties it tightly around Christie's wrist. For a couple of days, the house is quiet. The parasitic infection seems dormant.
Seems being the operative word.
Right? But then the parents hear a horrifying, wet, tearing sound coming from Christie's room.
And this is where the physical reality of the attachment shifts from psychological dominance to extreme biological violence.
They rush in, and Christie is crouched on her bed like a cornered animal. She isn't just pulling at the red thread, she's using her teeth to violently rip the blessed object off her wrist. But she is tearing entirely through her own flesh to do it. She's biting down deep into the veins of her wrist, ripping at her own skin and blood vessels. Blood is pouring down her hands, dripping from her teeth, and she's completely indifferent to the agonizing pain.
Going back to our biological metaphors, this is a severe autoimmune response. The parasitic entity is forcing the host body to literally destroy itself in order to reject the cure.
Because it can't feel the pain.
Exactly. The host pain receptors are entirely bypassed by the overriding consciousness.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Could this simply be a severe psychotic break triggered by latent trauma? Like, if Christie eventually realized the dark stain on her shirt was actually human blood, that level of shock could severely traumatize a person.
Right, potentially triggering a dissociative fugue state.
Or an episode of extreme self-harm.
A clinical psychiatric explanation would absolutely be the most logical conclusion if we only had the behavioral changes in the self-harm to go on. Dissociative identity disorder combined with trauma-induced psychosis could theoretically explain the voice and the violence. However, the source material presents subsequent physical feats that heavily challenge that diagnosis.
The roof incident.
Yeah.
Christie's mother wakes up in the middle of the night and hears heavy footsteps on the fragile tiled roof directly above their bedroom. She goes outside into the courtyard and looks up. Christie is sitting on the very edge of the steep roof, smoking, grinning down at her mother in the pitch black.
The mother faints from sheer terror.
Right. She faints, and the father comes rushing out to the courtyard.
Now pay close attention to the mechanics of what the entity forces the body to do next. It is a display of almost impossible physical leverage.
To get down from the roof, Christie completely ignores the stairs. Instead, she scales down the sheer exterior wall of the house, using only the flimsy exterior bamboo scaffolding that supports the roof tiles.
Wow.
She climbs down, basically suspended in midair, gripping the smooth bamboo with her bare hands and feet. As she descends, the entity looks directly at the father and issues a threat.
Don't try to separate us. I'll stay with her or take her.
But wait, let me challenge this for a second too. Who actually witnessed that descent? Her terrified father in the dead of night, having just found his wife passed out on the ground.
That's true.
We know that eyewitness testimony under extreme stress is notoriously unreliable. The human brain fills in the blanks when it panics. Isn't it highly likely he exaggerated how she got down in his own memory?
That is a very fair challenge to the source material. Memory is pliable, especially under trauma.
Yeah.
However, the architecture of the house complicates that skepticism.
How so?
Well, bamboo scaffolding is incredibly smooth and structurally precarious. The physical mechanics required for that descent, like the sheer grip strength, the core balance, the spatial awareness in the dark, they just do not align with the physical capabilities of a young woman with zero athletic conditioning.
That's a good point.
Even if the father's memory is slightly exaggerated, the entity's threat establishes a clear hostage situation. It is telling the parents, I control the hardware now.
And they try everything to force this thing out. They bring in a local healer who uses blessed, thick incense, trying to literally smoke the spirit out of her.
And how does she react?
Christie's reaction is to calmly pick up the burning incense sticks, shove the glowing, fiery ends directly into her mouth, chew them up, and swallow them like potato chips.
Unbelievable.
She suffers 0 burns and shows absolutely no pain response.
Because the entity feels no pain, right? It is merely wearing her body like a suit of armor. So, to figure out how to extract the entity, the family realizes they have to uncover how the infection started in the first place.
Exactly. So they seek out a tantric, an occult practitioner who specializes in these deep attachments. This tantric manages to bind the entity within a physical circle drawn on the floor, effectively trapping it, and begins a harsh interrogation.
Asking who it is, why it's there.
Yes. Who are you? Why are you torturing this girl?
And the resulting confession finally solves the mystery of the dark spatter on the white t-shirt.
The entity reveals that he was a young man who fell deeply in love with a girl from a different background. The girl's family found out about the relationship, and they were enraged.
And they didn't just murder him to keep them apart.
Right. No, they butchered him. They chopped his body into 25 distinct pieces, and at the exact moment he was violently dismembered, he was wearing that specific white t-shirt.
The same shirt that was bundled into a scrap bale and brought into Christie's bedroom.
The exact same one.
The profound trauma and sudden violence of his death became embedded in the physical fibers of the shirt. But the shirt merely provided the proximity. The tantric's interrogation uncovers the fatal misstep Christie made.
Which reveals the underlying universal mechanics of this type of haunting.
Right.
Because during those early dreams, after the cross was lost and the audio finally connected, the boy told Christie his tragic story. He told her about being murdered simply for being in love.
And Christie, being a highly empathetic, normal young woman, felt profound sorrow for him.
Exactly. In the dream, she looked at him and said, "If I were her, I would have run away with you."
Wow. If we connect this to the broader spectrum of global supernatural lore, this hits on the absolute core mechanism of attachment.
The power of consent.
Yes. In almost every cultural framework, entities require permission. Vampires must be invited across the threshold. Demonic attachments require a pact. By expressing that deep sympathy, by saying, "I would have accepted your love," Christie unwittingly offered a verbal binding invitation.
She signed a supernatural contract, completely unaware of the terms and conditions.
And the entity is not a mindless, chaotic monster. It is a deeply traumatized, fragmented consciousness, desperately seeking the love, validation, and life that was violently denied.
And Christie offered that validation.
Right, and the entity accepted it as a permanent lease.
The tantric realizes this bond is too deep and tells the parents they must take her to an ancient master in a remote village called Bangnan. The journey there is harrowing.
Because the entity fights back, right?
Yeah, as they try to force her into a vehicle, the entity fights back by locking her physical body down. Christie's body rigidly arches backward in a state of extreme opisopnos. Her spine bends so severely that her bones are audibly popping and cracking under the pressure.
She turns into a paralyzed human bridge.
Yes. She is so rigid they can't even bend her to fit into a normal passenger car.
It is a physiological manifestation of ultimate resistance. The parasite is paralyzing the host to prevent extraction.
So they are forced to hire a chota hafi, which is a small, open-backed commercial truck. They lay her rigid, arched body in the metal bed under a tarpaulin and drive for hours with her paralyzed and agonizing tension.
The imagery is stark and brutal. It really highlights the incredibly raw, desperate lengths a family will go to when modern medicine and logic have totally failed them.
They finally reach the ancient man in Bingyan, and he doesn't use violent chanting or smoke. He simply takes 2 freshly picked hibiscus flowers, one red, one white, and places them on either side of her arched body.
And what happens?
The tension instantly snaps. Christie's spine relaxes and she sits up, seemingly normal. But the ancient man then delivers a devastating diagnosis.
Because he cures the violent symptoms, but he cannot cure the underlying disease.
Exactly. He tells the parents, "I have bound him so he can no longer physically torture her body." But because she explicitly invited him in, because she consented to his love in that dream space. Well, not a quote, but he basically says he will never fully leave. They are bound together.
It is a profoundly tragic resolution. The entity is subdued into a dormant state, but the spiritual attachment remains entirely permanent.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, this shifts the entire perspective of the deep dive. Christie Panday is now 48 years old.
Decades later.
This entire ordeal happened when she was a college student over 2 decades ago. She has remained single her entire life, she never married, and the narrator of our source material actually tracked her down and spoke to her recently.
Decades after the exorcism in Bangor.
Yes, she still has that blood-stained white t-shirt carefully folded in her closet, and she told the narrator, with absolute sincerity, "I still love him. I consider him my partner. I want to spend the rest of my life with him."
Oh my God. This completely upends the narrative, but we have to look at the sociological implications here. I mean, in a traditional cultural setting where there is immense familial and societal pressure on women to enter into arranged marriages, could this spiritual marriage act as an airtight loophole?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Is her ongoing relationship with the entity a brilliant subconscious psychological defense mechanism to justify a lifetime of independence? Or has her consciousness genuinely merged with this entity in a symbiotic supernatural partnership.
It is terrifying, yet strangely heartbreaking. Christie's story establishes that a spirit requires emotional consent, a verbal contract, to fully attach. But that begs a terrifying question for you listening.
What if you never consent?
Right, what if you don't say a word and you're just in the wrong place at the very wrong time? The source material actually tests this exact variable with a second account.
Yes, moving from the power of a vow to the acute danger of physical proximity and raw biological temptation.
Exactly. This second account comes from a woman named Ananya, who runs a home delivery food business. One afternoon, a tragedy occurs in her neighborhood. A local man commits suicide by hanging. Ananya is walking home, and her route takes her right past the deceased man's house at the exact moment they are loading his body into the hearse.
And the sensory details of the scene are morbid but super vital here. The deceased man was exceptionally tall.
Unnaturally tall. The morgue workers are actually struggling to fit his heavy, rigid body into the back of the vehicle. They literally can't get the doors to close, so they have to use rope to tie the back door shut around his feet.
And because of this awkward struggle, there is a delay. The body is lingering in the open air.
Right at that exact moment of delay, Ananya walks past. And because of her delivery business, she is carrying a large bag of raw, uncooked meat.
This is the critical convergence. The intersection of a sudden, violently discarded life and a raw, biological element.
Almost instantly, Ananya experiences a massive physical contagion. She goes home and cooks the meat for her clients, but by the next morning, she is violently, inexplicably ill.
What are her symptoms?
She is suffering from freezing, bone-shaking chills. She is wrapped in 3 heavy blankets, shivering so hard her teeth are violently chattering and her hands have gone entirely numb. But here's the biological impossibility. When her mother checks her temperature with a thermometer, there is no fever. Her core body temperature is perfectly normal.
She is experiencing a phantom illness. The physical symptoms of extreme shock are manifesting in her nervous system, but the biological markers of an infection are completely absent.
She ends up collapsing, found entirely unconscious lying on some sacks of goods in her storage room. But the most disturbing detail happens moments before she faints.
Oh, the craving.
Yes. She's sitting in her bathroom, enduring this phantom cold, when a sudden, highly intrusive thought overwrites her brain. She feels an overwhelming, intense urge to know exactly what raw blood tastes like.
That urge is so deeply chilling because it is fundamentally alien to human nature. It is a purely parasitic instinct leading into the host's consciousness.
She is so terrified by this sudden craving that she runs to her mother, who immediately rushes her to a local Islamic healer at a nearby mosque.
And he diagnoses it, right?
He performs a water blessing and accurately diagnoses the exact mechanism of the attachment. He tells Ananya, "When you walked past that hearse, the spirit of the man was still lingering. He was forced to watch his own oversized body being awkwardly shoved into that vehicle.
Oh, wow.
He was in a state of massive confusion, panic, and a sudden violent deprivation of life. And in that moment of starving desperation, he saw you walking by with raw meat."
The healer clarifies that the spirit didn't latch onto her out of malice or desire to haunt. It latched on out of pure primal hunger. The raw meat in her hands acted as a beacon, representing the raw biological life force he had just violently discarded.
Both of these accounts illustrate a deeply structured supernatural ecosystem. Spirits in this framework don't just float ethereally through walls to rattle chains.
No, they require highly specific physical conduits to latch onto the living.
In Christie's case, it was the blood-stained fibers of a shirt combined with the vow of empathy. In Ananya's case, it was the raw meat intersecting with sudden death.
This is why exploring multiple cultural perspectives is so crucial. If we dismiss these accounts simply as campfire ghost stories, we miss out on a profound exploration of how human beings process grief, the danger of unfulfilled desires, and the shock of sudden violence.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
These narratives provide a complex framework for making sense of the senseless. They give a tangible shape to the lingering trauma that death leaves behind in the physical world.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've unpacked how empathy can act as a contract and how biological proximity can act as a magnet for trauma.
Right.
But if physical objects like a scrap of cloth or a bag of meat can serve as